$5 million. Hot dog!
Everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm John, and today we're here to talk about the 1947 Christmas classic, Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. We're also here today to talk about its 4K Blu-ray that came out originally in 2019. But before we dive into that conversation, if you're a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, tech and game reviews, we try to do them all here on the channel, and nothing helps out more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So It's a Wonderful Life has been my favorite Christmas movie for a very long time now. I first saw this when I was a kid on TV. I think NBC had the rights when I was a child. I know for people around in the 1970s and 80s, it was in the public domain, so anybody could have aired this and you could have saw it pretty much on any channel. Like, I think the originals were CBS, ABC, and NBC, and they all would just air this. And then when I was a kid, I believe the rights transferred to just one network, and I think they only play it once a year now, so it's a pretty big deal when they play it on TV. It's not like A Christmas Story where they play it for the entire day of Christmas. Now, you gotta catch this once. So for me, when I first started collecting Blu-rays and 4Ks, I had to grab this film on Blu-ray, and that's what I used to have until I upgraded to this 4K that came out in 2019. But before we dive into my review of that, I want to talk about this movie and why it is so special. This film stars one of the greatest actors of all time in Jimmy Stewart and one of the greatest actresses of all time in Donna Reed. But this really is James Stewart's movie. He is the star of this. He's worked with Frank Capra before, most famously in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which is another movie that I really love. But this came out right after World War II. James Stewart actually fought in World War II. He was a pilot. He actually, when he finally retired from the Army, he was a really high-ranking officer. He's actually a war hero, this guy. He's not one of those celebrities that just went in there to entertain. He actually was doing the work. When he came back, he got back into Hollywood. He wasn't even going to do this movie, but he decided to work again with Frank Capra, and they made this movie for Liberty Films, which is one of the only films ever made for Liberty Films, and it was distributed by RKO Productions, which is a very famous company, most famously for distributing Citizen Kane. But when this movie came around, it turned out to be a bomb at the box office. This only really actually ended up matching its production budget of $3 million, because if you've seen this movie, it's got quite a big production. All the stuff you see in this movie is real sets that were on the RKO ranch, and then they had to cover them with snow, and that was the big deal with this movie at the time, was they actually created a new way to make snow, and the snow looks great. It still holds up all these years later. It's still probably some of the best looking snow you've ever seen on film, and before that it was just too loud, and they actually created a new way to make snow, and it really shows on screen and it looks beautiful. But what really makes this movie special and what really makes it stand the test of time is the story, because this tells the story of George Bailey, and on one fateful Christmas Eve he decides to do the ultimate and decides to end his life. He can't take it anymore because George Bailey, he's blessed and he's cursed. He's cursed with the fact that he knew as a child exactly what he wanted to do. He always knew. Most people, it takes forever for them to figure out what they want to do with their lives, to find their place in the world. But George Bailey always knew he wanted to travel. He wanted to travel the world. He wanted to see the world. That's all he ever wanted to do. He was talking about this from the time he was a kid.
Someday, you watch, and I'm going to have a couple of harems, and maybe 3 or 4 wives.
One bit of bad luck after another. He loses the hearing in his ear, which was not going to prevent him from going. And then when he is finally about to go, unfortunately his father passes away, and he decides to do the honorable thing because everybody trusts him and they know he's a good man. He's going to do the right thing, and they decide that he's going to take over the Bailey Building and Loan.
Just one thing more, though. This town needs this measly one-horse institution, if only to have some place where people can come without crawling to Potter.
Even though he doesn't want to do that, he told his dad he didn't want to do that, but it's the right thing to do. And that's the thing with George Bailey. He is very unselfish. He is always going to do what's the best thing to do for others, always before himself. He never ever gets what he ever wanted to do. And he complains about that a couple times in this movie, you know, that he never got what he wanted. He knew what he wanted, but he was never able to get it. And that's what really drives him nuts in this world and really pushes him over the edge, is that he just never got what he wanted. But this movie's trying to teach you that you need to appreciate what you do have and you actually do mean to the world. You might not feel like you have a purpose in the world, but a lot of people rely on you, and a lot of people's lives wouldn't be as good as they are without you. And that's what this movie is trying to show you. Donna Reed's character of Mary had the same thing. She knew what she always wanted as a kid, but she always wanted George Bailey.
Bailey, I'll love you till the day I die.
She always wanted to live in that old house, and she got all that. She got the family, she got George. You know, everything kind of fell into her lap, where for George, it kind of didn't. Like, everything that he wanted, he couldn't get. But he does learn to appreciate what he does have, because that's what this movie is trying to show you. He has a great set of friends. He does have people that really do care about him. He has a great wife and kids. The way they structured this movie in 1946 is actually very cool. Like, it's told completely linearly. Like, yeah, there's a flashback in the beginning when they're in the sky and everything, and then when they put Clarence in as his guardian angel to go in there and, you know, save his life, protect him from killing himself, protect just what is the most important thing in the world, and that is living. From that point on, we get to see George's entire life told linearly, because if this had been released in the last 20 years, they would have just, you know, shown him on that day. Then we would get flashbacks of his childhood until eventually the stories would merge kind of in the third act. In this, they tell it completely linearly. About the first hour and 10 minutes of this movie, we see George from a child all the way up until the day he decides he's going to kill himself. The whole second half of the movie is about that day when he does decide to kill himself, and then Clarence jumps in the water to save him, as he says, and then showing him what the world would be like without George Bailey. It is one of the most famous movies ever put to film, and it still holds up to this very day. There's some amazing scenes in this, some great lines. I always had assumed that Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street was based on the names Bert and Ernie of Bert the cop and Ernie the taxi driver from this movie, but apparently Jim Henson has never confirmed that's true or not. Apparently, and people around Jim Henson all said that that's not true. He never said that he took it from this. He might have, but it's never been confirmed. This is a story that holds up, stands the test of time, because it's such a beautiful story that tells one of the best love stories you'll ever see, tells one of the best stories about just appreciating your life. Still holds up in the sense where we see a rich man taking advantage of the poor, or just trying to get richer for no reason and to keep other people down, just because for him being rich is more of a status symbol, and having the lure that over everybody else is more important than him than actually helping out people. He could feed the whole town. They bring that up in this movie, but he just chooses to lure over the fact that he is richer than them and that he believes he's a better person. These are all things that still hold up in 2022. It's still got a great message, and at the very end of this movie, when George Bailey's brother walks in and he says,
"To my big brother George, the richest man in town."
I will cry every single Christmas. I look forward to that cry every single year, because this is my ultimate favorite Christmas movie. It's not just a great Christmas movie, it's a great movie in general, and one that you should absolutely see. If by some miracle you haven't yet, I can guarantee you it is a great movie. But we're also here today to talk about its previously released 4K Blu-ray and let you know if that's worth your time and money. So this 4K Blu-ray was released in 2019, so it's 3 years old now to this point. This happened to be released by Paramount Pictures. It's presented in Dolby Vision and HDR10. It's in its original aspect ratio of 1.37, so you're going to get the letterbox kind of look where you get the black bars to the left and right of it. The audio on this is a Dolby True HD 2.0 mono track for a 1946 film. That actually makes perfect sense. It's a 2-disc set, and the second disc you get the colorized version of this film, because back in the late 80s, I believe it was Turner, was colorizing a lot of classic films, taking them away from the original black and white aspect and trying to add like a Technicolor kind of look to it. And I know a lot of people don't like that, and as a cinephile, you're really only supposed to watch the black and white version, but I will honestly admit every other year I watch the colorized version, and then every other year I watch the black and white version, because I do like both versions. I like what they did with the color of this, and I know that's not how the film was originally supposed to be presented. That's not how the film was shot by Frank Capra. I completely understand that, but I do like seeing it in both color and black and white, and it does, I think, add to the film. So if you're one of those people that's never seen it in color because, you know, you feel like it's kind of sacrilege, I completely understand, but I think you actually are missing out. I think it's a very nice colorized version. That Blu-ray is actually in this set. That's the second disc. It was actually on the previous Blu-ray as well, where you could have got the colorized version, so you could have actually in the previous Blu-ray had a black and white version and a colorized version. On my previous Blu-ray, I think the biggest jump I noticed is definitely in the audio. I think whatever they did to the audio, they touched up. There used to be some like drops or some loud clicks in the audio that they cleaned up perfectly with this mono track, but it is only a mono track, so you don't, and you really shouldn't expect more than that for a film like this. There's no reason to have the audio spreading around to your rear speakers or have some good use of your woofer. It's not that kind of movie. It's very much a dialogue-driven movie that's not necessary to have that. Would I have appreciated it? Sure, but it's completely unnecessary. So I'm really happy with the True HD mono track, just because the dialogue does come in completely clear now. You don't have those clicks, you don't have those drops in audio that you had on previous releases. They cleaned it up. It's going to be the cleanest sounding audio that you ever going to experience with this film is definitely on this 4K. And just before we dive into the visuals themselves, this 4K has a nice slipcover on it that I got. You know, I was always a big fan of this. I like the colors and the black and white with the blue and the red. I think this looks really nice on your shelf, and the light blue does fit in with the Christmas colors. You open it up, plain Jane disc design, black for 4K, blue for Blu-ray. Nothing special there. Now, over the years, I've seen a lot of movies get transferred to 4K in black and white, and I've heard a lot of people complain that that's completely unnecessary for the 4K format. And I can give you plenty of examples where that's not true. I think there is some great 4Ks that have come out in black and white. A lot of them in this year, in 2022. Touch of Evil, The Killing, last year's Citizen Kane, like those are all great 4K transfers. And now this 4K, I don't think actually looks as good as any of those 4Ks, even though this does have HDR and Dolby Vision. I think that those have some better black and white, but this black and white still does hold up really well. It looks way better than the previous Blu-ray. This is the best the black and white version has ever looked. The color version is exactly the same as on the previous Blu-ray, so there's no changes. They didn't go in and touch that up or anything like that. They put all their effort into making this black and white transfer look gorgeous, and it does look gorgeous. I just watched this again the other day. You know, the blacks are really deep. You really get that contrast now between the blacks, the grays, and the whites. The blacks look deep. It doesn't look faded. You don't have that, like, kind of like, okay, the black is just a dark gray, it's not black. No, the blacks, and depending on what kind of TV you're watching it on, if you're watching it on an OLED, you're going to get true blacks from this 4K. So they did do a phenomenal job on that. Towards the end of the movie, where you get when George Bailey's at night in the snow walking around and he ends up in Martini's bar, like all that stuff looks great. It's all going to pop off your screen. It looks vivid. The resolution is as high as it possibly could be. This is the definitive version of this film visually. I can't imagine it's going to look any better than this, because how far can we push this? This is a 1946 film. I can't imagine they can touch this up more than they ever have. It's gotten consistently better since I've seen it in the 90s, and I can only imagine what it looked like in previous releases with the previous scans. This is the best it's ever going to look. I can't watch this film on TV anymore. I can only watch it on this 4K or the colored version that's in here. Although you can actually watch both of these versions on Amazon, but you're not going to get the same exact quality you get after you're pulling it off a disc, because it's not compressed on this disc, and you're going to watch it in beautiful 4K on whatever 4K player you have. I promise you it's gonna look great. And for one of the greatest films ever made, you want the best version of this film. And that's kind of the one thing that I have a bit of a disappointment with, is the extras on there. There is not much, if any at all. There is a nice extra on here about actually showing how they did the restoration of this, which I think for people who are really fascinated how they bring old films to the 4K format, I think you should check that out. But, you know, I would love some making of documentaries, some commentary tracks. There's plenty of people looking back on this. Like, this is something that should be in the Criterion Collection, but it's such a moneymaker for Paramount or whatever studio has the rights to this now, that they are never going to lease out the rights to the Criterion Collection. They want all those profits for themselves. And, you know, honestly, that's something that this movie is really showing you anyways, that all these corporations or any of these big bosses, they don't really care. They just care about their bottom line and making a profit, because if the Criterion Collection got a hold of this, we got like a whole disc of extras, it would probably be one of the best 4K releases we've ever gotten from the Criterion Collection, because just like Citizen Kane, although Citizen Kane's Criterion packaging is some of the worst I've ever seen, I hope we never get that again, but if we would just get a nice digibook packaging of Criterion with It's a Wonderful Life, one of the greatest films ever, I really think that would be the ultimate edition of this. I just don't think we'll ever get that. So for now, this version of It's a Wonderful Life is the definitive edition. If you haven't grabbed it yet, I promise you it's well worth the money, even at its full price. But you can get this on sale all the time, and it's well worth its price. That's going to do it for us here today. And if you are a fan of this video, nothing helps out the channel more than by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to grab this from Amazon, we'll leave our Amazon affiliate link in the description below. And if you guys happen to celebrate the holidays that are going on right now, we want to wish you guys a happy holiday here from Let's Talk. Enjoy it. Spend some time with your family and friends. We know that this time of the year can be hard on people. And if you just need someone to talk to, you could always just reach out to us and we'll talk to you. And we'll talk about some movies and we'll have some fun. But anyway, guys, enjoy it. Have a great time. And then while you're out there, make sure you tell all your friends about Let's Talk Entertainment Media.